You've probably seen the headlines. Population growth in the UK has basically ground to a halt. But the real reason why? Well, it is almost certainly not what you think. And the answer is hidden in a couple of really simple numbers.
Okay, so here's the first number you need to know. Roughly 600,000. That's about how many babies are born in the UK in a typical year. Now, that's just one side of a very simple but very, very important equation.
And here is the other side of that equation: deaths. Guess how many? Yep, also about 600,000 a year. So what does that mean? Well, it's pretty stark. The number of people coming in is almost exactly the same as the number of people going out. The population just isn't growing on its own anymore. It's flatlining. And what's wild is just how new this is. I mean, for centuries, it was a given. Births always, and I mean comfortably, outnumbered deaths. That was the engine that powered the country's growth. But then, really quietly, in just the last few years, that engine just sputtered out and stopped. So there's a technical term for this. It's called the fertility replacement rate. It's basically the magic number of kids a woman needs to have on average just to keep the population from shrinking. That number is 2.1. And the UK's current rate, it's all the way down at 1.4. That is a huge gap. It means that by definition, the native-born population is actually shrinking with every single generation. So what on earth is going on? The answer you hear all the time is migration. But that's getting it completely backwards. Migration isn't the cause of this. It's more like a Band-Aid that's been covering up a much deeper problem. The real answer, the one that's a lot more uncomfortable, has everything to do with money. All right, let's unpack this. The first domino to fall actually starts with what sounds like amazing news. We're all living longer, way longer. But, and this is a huge but, that wonderful development has had this massive, completely unintended financial side effect. Think about it like this. Back in the 1950s, you'd probably receive an inheritance in your late 40s. Perfect timing, right? That's right in your peak family building years, when you need that cash the most. But fast forward to today, and that same inheritance doesn't show up until you're in your late 50s or even your early 60s. And that delay, it changes everything. The money hasn't vanished, but what it's for has totally transformed. By the time that wealth finally trickles down, the kids are grown. They're way past the point of needing it for a house deposit or for crippling childcare costs. So instead of kickstarting the next generation, that inheritance now just tops up a pension fund. All right, so domino number one, wealth is showing up way too late to help young families get started. Now for the second domino. This one's all about how the very idea of what a house is for has been completely flipped on its head. It all really goes back to the death of the old school company pension. You know, the final salary ones. That was a promise, a rock-solid guarantee of an income for life. But when we all started living so much longer, that promise just became too expensive for companies to keep. So it got replaced by, well, a pot of money, a defined contribution pension. The new message was basically, here's your pot, good luck, you're on your own now. So let me ask you, if you're suddenly responsible for funding a retirement that could last 20, 30, even 40 years, plus the terrifying cost of long-term care, what's the one and only asset most ordinary people have that's big enough to even touch that? Yep, you guessed it, their house. And this quote just nails it. The house is no longer a foundation for the future family, it's an insurance policy for the past one. Suddenly, that housing wealth isn't something to be passed down to help your kids. It's become your own private safety net, a nest egg you might have to crack open just to survive your own old age. That wealth is locked up, tight. Okay, so let's recap. Wealth arrives too late, and what wealth exists is locked up in houses being used as insurance policies. So the obvious solution is, well, just earn the money yourself, right? And this is where we hit the third and honestly the most brutal piece of the puzzle. Just look at this. It's absolutely staggering. Since the 1970s, real wages, so what your money can actually buy, have, about doubled, which sounds okay, I guess. But in that same period, house prices have gone up tenfold. That's not a gap, it's a chasm. The disconnect between what people earn and what it costs to have a stable home is just immense. And here's the hard truth, the crucial connection. When you look at the data, it's undeniable. Birth rates are at their lowest, without fail, where housing is the most expensive and the most insecure. It makes total sense, right? Before you can even think about having kids, you need a basic level of stability. You need to know where you're going to be living in a few years, not just until your 12-month rental contract is up. And as if that massive economic pressure wasn't enough, You've got specific policy choices that have just poured fuel on the fire. Things like the two-child benefit cap, the absolutely astronomical cost of childcare, the constant anxiety of short-term renting. All of this has taken having a child from being financially challenging to being a completely unmanageable financial risk for millions of people.
Okay, so now we've got all the pieces on the table. Let's take a step back and connect the dots. Let's line up those dominoes and see exactly how this chain reaction works.
So here it is, the economic chain reaction. Number 1, we're living longer, so wealth gets delayed for decades. Number 2, pensions got weaker, so homes had to become insurance policies instead of family foundations. And number 3, the cost of that housing shot into the stratosphere, leaving wages in the dust. And the final result of all that? Stability itself, the very bedrock you need to start a family, has become a luxury item. And that brings us right back to where we started. Migration didn't cause this problem. It's a symptom of it. It's what happened when the country's own engine of population growth was effectively priced out of the market. The economy still needed workers, and immigration filled a gap that we created ourselves. So, the next time you hear people arguing about the UK's population, just remember this. This isn't really a story about culture or about losing control. It's a story about economics. Britain didn't suddenly lose the desire to have kids. It simply priced the next generation out of being able to afford them.